The pickup market has doubled in size and become far more competitive since we saw the original version of Isuzu's D-Max back in 2012. Hence, the need for this revised, smarter and more efficient version, which, as before, will be as capable in the Serengeti as it is in Surbiton. It's the pickup you'd choose if you want one not afraid to put a bit of serious dirt beneath its wheels. Let's try it.
Too often these days, pickups are seen as lifestyle accessories. Here's one, though, primarily engineered for hard work: Isuzu's much improved D-Max. You would expect a more serious approach to a vehicle like this from a brand of this sort. Isuzu is, after all, not only Japan's oldest motor manufacturer, but the only maker on the market that for decades has dedicated itself to the very specific needs of pickup people, with practical utilitarian TF and then Rodeo models that were light on lifestyle but tough to beat. The original version of this D-Max, which was launched in 2012, made those rugged virtues a little more accessible, but it was still a slightly cruder thing than most obvious rivals. What was needed was a little more polish and a lot more running cost efficiency, all paired with the same solid dependability. And that's what we're told has been delivered here. Now, Isuzu knows that at first glance, long-time D-Max owners might have a few qualms about switching to this revised model, which was launched in the spring of 2017. After all, there aren't too many visual changes, and the old 2.5-litre diesel engine has been replaced by a downsized 1.9-litre unit with less pulling power than before. Take a second glance, though, and the appeal of this much improved package starts to become rather more obvious. The engine puts out 164 PS, which is virtually the same as before, and the small torque deficit has been compensated for with revised gearing, which is why this truck's 3.5-ton towing capacity remains unbettered in the class. Now, as you'd expect, that 1.9-litre power plant is far cleaner and more economic than its predecessor. Plus, its considerably lighter weight also allows for a useful 50-kilo payload increase across the range and enables this Isuzu to be driven without the major road speed restrictions which do now apply to some of its heavier rivals. Of course, the improvements to this model aren't all about the engine. Buyers also get the option of a new 6-speed automatic gearbox, slightly smarter looks, a redesigned cabin, stronger standards of safety and a more complete equipment tally, especially when it comes to media connectivity. All from a brand that, unlike its rivals, dedicates itself completely to selling commercial vehicles and supporting their owners. Now, if you think that sounds promising, you're going to want to know more. So, let's put this D-Max to the test. Have you ever bought something and found it a bit underspecified for the job you had in mind? It's annoying, isn't it, when you do that? It's good to choose something quite the opposite. A watch, say, that's waterproof to 200 metres. Maybe a quad-band mobile phone. Or perhaps this Isuzu D-Max pickup. This thing feels completely bulletproof in the way that, in our experience, only the more expensive Toyota Hilux can match. But does it have the tools to do the job in this revised guise? After all, the original model's venerable old 2.5-litre diesel engine that would take you through almost anything has been discarded in favour of a downsized 1.9-litre unit. Now, though this new power plant puts out 164 PS, and that's virtually the same as its predecessor, it develops 40 newton-metres less torque, the total figure having slipped from 400 to 360 newton-metres. To try and compensate, Isuzu has changed the gearing ratio. There's now a very short throw between first and second gear, and that's helped to maintain the previous model's impressive towing ability. 4x4 versions of this truck will still pull along up to 3.5 tons. That's all well and good, but if you're familiar with the previous version of this model, you will notice the changes that have gone on under the bonnet. That very short first gear means that you have to reg the engine harder than before to get going, especially when you're towing. That in turn does very little for cabin refinement, though the rattly diesel grumble from up front isn't as intrusive as it was from the old 2.5-litre unit. Obviously, one of the main reasons for downsizing from that old engine was to improve running cost efficiency, and that's something that's much aided by this smaller power plant's 64 kilogram weight saving. That's had other advantages too, making sure that this D-Max doesn't face the speed restrictions that apply to rival pickup models that have an unladen weight of over 2,040 kilos. Models like those, which include all double cab Volkswagen Amarok and Toyota Hilux models, and nearly all double cab Ford Rangers, are limited to 60 miles an hour on dual carriageways and to 50 miles an hour on a single carriageway. You won't face that issue in this Isuzu. The 6-speed manual gearbox that most customers will choose is carried over from the original D-Max model, but the 6-speed automatic that we're trying here is new, and it features gear control learning. Essentially, that means ratio changes are adapted to suit your driving circumstances. To be frank, we have found it to be a little slow to change up and a little too quick to change down, all of which would leave us preferring an ordinary stick shift unless we really were urban bound. If you're quick with it, 62 miles an hour can be reached from rest in 12.7 seconds on the way to a top speed of 112 miles an hour. More importantly, though, you'll need plenty of room to turn this pickup around. The turning circle on the 4x4 models is set at 12.2 metres. Whichever of the two transmissions you choose, opt for an all-wheel drive variant like this one, and there are certainly plenty of choices open to you on the move. There's a set of high-range gears you can use in either 2 or 4-wheel drive, plus there's also a low-range gear ratio option for the really mucky stuff. Most of the time you'll be driving like we are now on tarmac with 2 driven rear wheels, a configuration that, as usual in a pickup, offers better economy and a little more steering feel. Not enough to make you want to chuck this vehicle around, mind you. Plunk your boot on the throttle with an empty load bay on a wet roundabout, and you'll unsettle this pickup just as you would any other, as the laws of physics go to work. The leaf-sprung rear end can also feel a bit fidgety on country lanes, but in both scenarios, as is usual with this kind of vehicle, things are much improved if you're carrying a bit of weight in the back. As in almost any type of truck, you'll have to manage your expectations when it comes to ride quality. Any vehicle with a tough ladder-framed chassis on a solid leaf-sprung rear axle is going to exhibit an inevitably utilitarian feel, and you'll certainly experience that over broken surfaces in this one. Still, the coil springs and dampers which carry the front axle in this design certainly do a much more effective job than the crude torsion bar system that was used by older Isuzu pickups. For wet or icy tarmac or light off-piste work, you can take the opportunity at up to 60 miles an hour to twist this centre console dial and select high-range all-wheel drive. It takes a second or so for the front wheels to engage, but when they do, the D-Max feels notably more sure-footed on the slippery stuff. Of course, once in a while, you'll need to do more, and those are occasions on which you'll be further twisting this dial to engage the full low-range four-wheel drive mode, and that's something that can only happen when the vehicle's stationary. In this mode, you really do get an incredibly accomplished off-roader, aided by a first gear ratio that is an ideal crawler gear over rough terrain, over which you'll appreciate a ground clearance that at 235 millimetres is a little higher than you get with many other rival pickups. In extremis, you'll also benefit from very useful approach and departure angles. Those are respectively 30 and up to 22 degrees. That's when you'll appreciate the hill start assist and hill descent control systems that now come as standard across the range. There's also a 22-degree ramp angle and a maximum traversing angle of 49 degrees. The official wading depth, that is set at 600 millimetres for the 4x4 models. And in deep mud, well, a clever brake traction control system helps no end. If you've only got one front wheel with meaningful traction, this setup will figure out that it needs to send drive to that wheel and crawl you out of trouble. You can also disengage that system for the moments when you want to deliberately generate wheel spin to cut through a slippery top surface, for example, in order to gain traction underneath. Styling has not been a priority for Isuzu pickups in the past, which offered rugged, squarical shapes, big wheels, lots of chrome and not a lot else. The original version of this D-Max model moved that philosophy forward a little, with a rather more appealing design originally developed in the wind tunnel of the Japanese Railway Research Institute, the place where the famous bullet train was born. Now the shape has been further refined here. Most of the changes have taken place here at the front, where the bumper and the bonnet have been revised, as has this imposing grille that separates restyled headlights, now incorporating LED daytime running lights. There are smarter front fog lamps too. Move to the side and the changes are more difficult to spot. The wedgie shaped, enhanced as before by muscular front wings that flare around wheel arches that now house restyled rims of up to 18 inches in size. Isuzu says it's redesigned the roof to make it more aerodynamic, and as before, roof rails come as standard on really plush models like this one. Move to the back and there's a reshaped tailgate with a revised handle and a spoiler design moulded into the top section. Avoid entry-level variants and you also get these LED tail lamps with their more distinct nighttime signature. Time to take a seat behind the wheel. A well-positioned step and grab handle ease your entry into the cab. And once you're inside, there's the high-set driving position that's absolutely typical of a pickup in this class. Interior quality, that's another thing that Isuzu knew it had to improve with the revised version of this model, which wasn't easy to do given that the budget didn't stretch to a full cabin redesign. Not surprisingly then, the overall ambiance is very much as it was before, focused a great deal on durable practicality. Now, there is a valid argument suggesting this to be completely appropriate for what is, after all, a properly tough working vehicle, but the sales figures suggest that the private buyers driving market share in this segment are looking for a little more in terms of creature comforts. This top blade variant attempts to provide some of this with its full leather upholstery featuring smart orange stitching that lifts the cabin considerably. In terms of the interior changes made to this revised D-Max model, the instrument panel has been redesigned with an updated central display and clearer fonts for the instruments. Well, that's welcome, but to be frank, we'd have preferred it if the money had been spent on providing a steering wheel that was able to adjust for reach as well as rake. As for other enhancements that have been made, well, there is smarter upholstery or upgraded leather trim on plusher variants like this one. And across the premium end of the model range, soft pads have been added to the front centre and the side armrests for increased comfort and a more refined feel. Infotainment's been upgraded this time around. Avoid the entry-level variants and you get a 7-inch multifunction touchscreen. That's been upgraded in size to 9 inches on this flagship Blade derivative. Both setups still feel a bit aftermarket, but in most models the display is embellished with the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto systems, which will allow you to duplicate the operation of your smartphone handset onto that centre dash display. The buttons on this monitor are a little small. You'd struggle to use those if you were wearing gloves, for example. There's no problem in that regard with the rest of the switchgear, though, the buttons on offer generally being broad and chunky. Further down the centre stack, variants featuring climate control get this rather unusual circular array of controls, but we continue to prefer the rather less stylish but ergonomically superior dials of the lower trim models, which are easier to use without taking your eyes off the road. As for practicalities, well, the front door bins, they could be bigger. Otherwise, storage space around the cabin's perfectly acceptable. There's a lockable glove box, there's a deep lidded box between the seats here, there's a pop-up compartment on top of the dashboard, there's a shelf beneath the steering column, and there's a sunglasses holder above the windscreen. Plus, extra USB ports have been added around the dash. And there are enough cup holders for an in-car espresso gathering. You'll find one at either end of the fascia, plus there are 2 more here between the seats. You even get them here in the back of this double cab variant in this fold-out lower compartment. For rear-seated folk, there's slightly more passenger comfort than is provided by some rival models, thanks to this Isuzu's relatively long wheelbase. This facilitates head, shoulder and legroom, and it allows this seat back to be less vertically inclined for greater comfort on longer journeys. A trio of 3-point belts and headrests are provided, but in truth, 3 adults would be a little squashed here on longer journeys. But then that's also the case with every other double cab contender in this segment. One nice touch is the way that this 60-40 split folding rear seat base enables you to more flexibly use this rear passenger space for packages if you so wish. Plus, you can also pull down the rear seat backrest. In a pickup market increasingly characterised by rather restrictive product lineups, the D-Max model range is refreshingly broad. A number of competitors now limit buyers to one double cab body style, and even those that don't often offer a very limited selection of trim options with the other body shapes. It's different with this Isuzu, as you might expect it to be, given that the D-Max is the only model of its kind that the brand sells in our market. So, as well as this double cab body style, there are single cab and extended cab options too. Plus there's a two-wheel drive variant at the bottom of the range with an automatic gearbox option further up. All variants use the same 1.9 litre 164 PS diesel engine. Excluding the VAT element that most business buyers will be able to claim back, prices sit in the £16,000 to £28,000 bracket across a range that's effectively split into two parts. Now, the base utility variants at the foot of the lineup are really only for industrial buyers, and it's only in this part of the lineup that you get the option of two-wheel drive or the single cab body style. The plusher premium models start from just over £20,000 ex-VAT, and they offer that automatic gearbox option for an extra £1,000 if you want it. Trim options, they run from Eiger through Yukon and Utah variants to the top Blade model that we've been trying here. Only at Yukon level do you get the option of the extended cab body style with its occasional rear seating bench. Otherwise, it's this double cab body shape all the way. On to the value proposition those prices represent against pickup rivals in this segment. Now, the importers know that this D-Max won't really tempt many high-end pickup buyers who will be considering products like the Mercedes X-Class, 3-litre versions of the Volkswagen Amarok, and possibly also a 3.2-litre Ford Ranger. At the other extreme, Isuzu also isn't really interested in positioning this model as the budget choice in the sector. That place in this class is occupied by SsangYong's Musso, an equivalently spec'd version of which would probably save you a couple of £1,000 or so over a comparable D-Max. All of which leaves this vehicle firmly focused on the heart of the segment, an area currently dominated by pickups like Mitsubishi's L200, Toyota's Hilux and Nissan's Navara. Four-cylinder versions of the aforementioned Ford Ranger and Volkswagen Amarok models also figure prominently, plus more recent segment arrivals like Fiat's Fallback and Renault's Alaskan offer further buying options. This D-Max won't save you very much over mainstream contenders of that sort, but most variants do come in at a few £100 less than directly comparable rivals. Plus, Isuzu dealers will be quick to point out that the asking figures also get you a slightly better specified vehicle, and, from their perspective anyway, a tougher and more durable one. If, having considered all of that, you conclude that it is a D-Max that you really want, well, then you're going to need to know just how generous Isuzu has been with the standard spec. And that's something that the brand says has been considerably improved with this revised model. Now, the facts do bear that out. Previously, we always felt that the Isuzu's claims for tough, go-anywhere ruggedness with this pickup were somewhat undermined by the absence of a spare wheel in the standard spec. Now, this time around, that lighter engine weight has allowed the brand to put that right on all variants. As for other standard features, well, even the industrial spec utility derivatives now come with LED daytime running lights, remote central locking, hill assist and hill descent control, plus there's air conditioning and Bluetooth phone connectivity. All the premium models get a reversing camera too. As I mentioned earlier, Eiger spec will be your starting point in that premium range, a trim level that gets you 16-inch alloy wheels and a 6-speaker CD audio system. Most buyers, though, will want to upgrade themselves to the mid-range Yukon variants that look and feel smarter both inside and out. Now, that is thanks to the provision of larger 18-inch alloy rims, LED rear lights, a rear load liner and silver side steps, while in the cabin there's a leather steering wheel, cruise control and a 7-inch multi-function centre dash colour touchscreen. Now, previously, the top model in the standard range was the Utah variant, which this time around comes with satellite navigation, keyless entry, and the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto phone connectivity systems. Now, that's in addition to features carried over from before, like full leather upholstery, heated front seats, a DAB radio, roof bars, rear parking sensors, and climate-controlled air conditioning. In this revised D-Max lineup, though, Utah trim slots in below what was previously a special edition spec level, the Blade model that we've been trying here. As before, Blade buyers can choose between a roller shutter cover for the cargo bay or an Era Class canopy, the latter smartly redesigned now. Plus, at this level in the lineup, there's a larger 9-inch infotainment touchscreen, tinted windows, remote locking for the lower tailgate, puddle lamps and front parking sensors too. On to options. There's the usual selection of tow bars, plus the selection of hardtops, roller shutters and tonneau covers for the load bay that all pickup brands offer. A slightly more unusual extra that we do like the look of is what Isuzu calls its bed extender, and that's ideal for those occasions when you need just a little more room than the cargo bed can offer. It's a gate that you can put across the back of the bed entry that enables you to use the retracted tailgate flap. You can also specify rails, nets and dividers for the load bay, plus a bed rug too. What else? Well, you can add in a reversing camera on the utility models, and navigation is an affordable option in the popular mid-range Yukon variants. Below Blade level, you can also add in the full house 9-inch infotainment system too. If you're going to be regularly taken to the wilds, you might want to consider the various underbody guards on offer, and they'll protect the diff and the other vulnerable mechanicals. Bonnet edge protectors available too. If you're into aesthetics, your dealer will offer you various alloy wheel designs in 16, 17 or 18-inch sizes, with the 17-inch rims optionally also offered finished in black. You can add chrome trimming around the headlights and the tail lamps, and you can have rear style bars above the load bay finished in black as here or in stainless steel. If you want to convince your friends that you go night rabbit hunting at weekends, you can put high-intensity laser lamps on the roof, and you might want to add in black side steps too. Practical options include covers for the seats and door sills, a tailgate damper and an extra 12-volt socket. On to safety. Now, another advantage of the smaller, lighter 1.9-litre engine fitted to this revised D-Max is that it allows for a larger front crumple zone to improve pedestrian safety, something further helped by the redesigned front bumper and bonnet. Otherwise, safety standards are pretty much as they were before, Isuzu having, well, for the time being anyway, ignored the current pickup trend towards fitting camera-driven electronic safety features. So there are twin front side and curtain airbags, anti-whiplash head restraints, plus there's a 4-channel anti-lock braking system, TCS traction control and ESC stability control. There's also an EBD, electronic brake force distribution setup, that compensates for front and rear load differences during braking. On to the loading practicalities, which haven't changed with this revised D-Max model. Let's base our analysis around this double cab body style. That's the one that most UK customers will want. Around 5.3 metres long, this is certainly a pretty large vehicle, so you won't be surprised to flip down this sturdy drop-down tailgate, which can only retract to horizontal level because of that chunky bumper, and find a pretty substantial cargo area on offer. And now this can handle slightly heavier and slightly bulkier loads than could be accommodated in, say, a rival Mitsubishi L200 or Nissan MP300 Navara. Let's get specific. There's 1,485 millimetres of load bay length in this double cab body style. That's a figure that rises to 1,795 in the extended cab body style and 2,305 with the single cab body shape. All variants offer 1,530 millimetres of load bay width and 465 mils of load bay depth. That, of course, makes this area easily big enough to take a Euro pallet, which can slide in between the 1,110 millimetre width between the wheel arches. A load liner is standard on plusher variants like this one. We've got the bed rug option here as well. And there are 4 tie-down points to stop loads from moving around, which is just as well because this vehicle doesn't offer a ladder rack behind the cab to protect the driver if all else fails and something really heavy slides forward. As for the potential payload, well, the lighter engine has allowed Isuzu's engineers to increase this capacity by around 50 kilos, which means that on a double cab D-Max like this one, the weight you can take will either be a fraction above or a fraction below the 1.1 tonne mark, and that depends on the variant you choose. Go for a single cab D-Max, and on a rear-driven two-wheel drive variant, that figure could rise to nearly 1.3 tonnes. The two-wheel drive derivative, though, inevitably has a much lower potential towing weight. That's just 2,500 kilos. Despite the reduction in overall engine size, though, all 4x4 D-Max variants can still tow up to 3,500 kilos, which is equal to rival Ford Ranger, Volkswagen Amarok and Nissan MP300 Navara competitors, but 500 kilos better than a rival Mitsubishi L200. On to running costs, which had slipped some way behind the class standard with the previous 2.5-litre engine version of this model. Now, that pickup couldn't even reach 40 miles per gallon on the combined cycle, and it delivered a smoky CO2 figure close to 200 grams per kilometre. Both stats had become untenable in the current pickup market. To give you some idea of just why, let's tell you that the most efficient pickup in this segment, the base version on Nissan's MP300 Navara, manages 44.1 mpg on the combined cycle and 159 grams per kilometre of CO2 in double cab manual form. This 1.9-litre diesel engine D-Max can't quite match that, but its returns are a considerable improvement on what was offered before. The 4x4 manual double cab model that most customers will choose manages 40.4 mpg on the combined cycle and 183 grams per kilometre of CO2. Those are figures that fall to 36.2 mpg and 205 grams per kilometre if you go for the automatic gearbox we're trying here. The addition of a gear shift change indicator on the dash may help owners get somewhere close to those figures on a day-to-day basis. It's also worth pointing out that this Euro 6 compliant Isuzu unit is the only diesel engine in the segment that achieves its efficiency without putting you to the hassle of continually having to put in an AdBlue fluid additive. This vehicle's environmental performance will be increasingly important if, or more likely when, the Treasury starts to rate pickups under the same kind of CO2-based personal taxation system that's used for ordinary cars. Currently, benefit-in-kind taxation on this kind of pickup is a flat rate of £3,170, regardless of emissions, and business users will pay at 20%, 40% or 45% rates, depending on their income. What else? Well, there's 3 years of roadside recovery and assistance, 3-year paint warranty and 6 years of anti-corrosion cover. Plus, you get a decent 5-year, 120,000-mile transferable warranty, which reinforces a reputation for durability and ruggedness for which Isuzu pickups have become renowned. Not that you're likely to need it. In development, this D-Max design underwent over 2.5 million miles of endurance testing. That's the equivalent of 100 times around the world. And because of that, we weren't surprised to learn that an unmodified D-Max competing in the British Cross Country Championship was the only competitor that over 2 years of running never suffered any kind of mechanical failure. What else? Residual values for the previous 2.5-litre version of this model were strong, suggesting that after 3 years and 60,000 miles of use, your D-Max would still be worth around 40% of what you originally paid for it. Now, we don't expect that showing to change much this time around. Independent experts CAP reckon that after 3 years and 60,000 miles, a mid-range Yukon double cab manual model would be worth £9,950 ex-VAT, while this top blade variant in manual form would be worth £12,325 ex-VAT after the same period. Servicing is every 12,000 miles or 24 months, and that looks good against, say, a rival Mitsubishi L200, which needs a dealer visit every year. Insurance, meanwhile, is rated at either Group 39A or 40A, and that depends on the derivative you choose. If you thought Isuzu pickups were a bit rough and ready, it's probably about time you gave this D-Max a try. Once, this brand was really only reserved for the requirements of pure commercial operators. These days, though, it'll also suit private buyers looking for an all-terrain utility vehicle that can play the lifestyle card. But how does it stack up in what's becoming quite a crowded market? Well, very well actually. Price-wise, it's one of the best value choices in the class. And now that the styling's so much tidier than the Isuzus of old and the equipment levels are a lot better, the brand's appeal has been broadened to suit the sort of buyer who would previously have automatically looked to, say, a Ford Ranger, a Nissan MP300 Navara or Toyota Hilux. Prior to the launch of this revised 1.9-litre D-Max, that kind of customer might well have been attracted to this vehicle, but then been put off by the cheap-feeling cabin that you got on the original version of this design, and perhaps more acutely by the old 2.5-litre model's disappointing standards of refinement, cleanliness and frugality. Now, this improved D-Max still doesn't stand out in any of those areas, but it's now close enough to the class standard for its other attributes to begin to more brightly shine. This is, after all, by a small margin, the most practical pickup in the class in terms of the size and weight of things it can carry. It's now one of the few models that's light enough to avoid highway speed limitations, and the only one that you don't have to continually top up with an AdBlue fuel additive. No other rival can tow a heavier load, and experience would suggest that no other pickup will prove to be more rugged should you continually subject it to serious off-road use. As a result, you can see why so many professionals choose this Isuzu. In a marketplace that's full of pretenders, it's that rarest of things, the genuine article.